Okay, so I'm going to be taking a look at the performance aspects of the Intel E5 Xeon E5 2640, should we say. In this video we'll be using a software known as SiSoftware Sandra, or SiSoftware Sandra now. I've been using that since back in Intel Socket 478 and AMD 939 eras, and building my system since then, testing mainly for overclocking to see how far along I've come performance wise. It's quite now a very comprehensive software. It's got many aspects of benchmarking for system wide in general, but it's also got a very comprehensive CPU software. Okay, so if we take a look at the SiSoftware Sandra program, we can see that it's quite an extensive program, and we have quite a lot of different benchmarking tests available for the system, well, system wide as a whole, but it's just mainly on the second tier down, the CPU benchmarks that we want to be looking at today. Obviously I'll do this across a couple of videos, so I want to keep the videos quite short instead of doing one long one. People might find that more of a pain to sit through a longer video than two shorter ones, so we'll get through a couple of tests today. You just have to bear with the fact that the same hotkey for the screen recording is the same as the help for SiSoftware Sandra, so it comes up in the top corner, so I'll just get rid of that out of the way. You know, at the same time I set it off recording, it obviously brings up the pop-up for the help, so that I'll just delete that. If we take a look at the multi-threaded test, you see at the top you've got a drop down where you can choose for the multi-threaded, multi-core or single core test to run the same test, obviously in those scenarios. Down on the left we've got a tick box section which allows us to pit it against other CPU models from AMD and Intel. In this test, which is the arithmetic and floating point test, I've pitted it against the Intel 4770K in blue, the i7 2600K, another Sandy Bridge like our Xeon, in green, and the i7 3770, which is a newer architecture, 3.4 gigahertz. So most of these processors are faster than our Xeon. Obviously our Xeon has got more cores, more threads, so you know, that's where it will make up most of the difference. We can see that it's actually not far behind in the top dry stone test. It's not actually far behind the 4770K. The 4770K does just beat it with 148.97 GIPS. The whetstone aggregated float, we can see at the bottom that it's a lot closer to the 4770K. Obviously our Xeon is the red. It always gives your CPU in red keying, and you can see that it's only just the 4770K is only just ahead, basically 90, just wait for it to come back round, 90 to, you know, to 91. So it's 90.80 to 91.67, so there's not much in it. There. The other Sandy Bridge, the 2600K, is relatively similarly paced to our Sandy Bridge Xeon. In the top test, in the dry stone, but in the whetstone at the bottom, you can see the table, it's lagging behind significantly. So it's that's what we can see there. I'll run through it'll run through at the bottom with the actual performance, so we can see the actual numbers all the way along. I'll scroll through there. Okay, so in this test we're now moving on to the multimedia processing performance benchmarking tests. I think we'll choose to do this one next for this video. And we can also see that over on the left it's now giving us the option of tick boxing an Intel Core i7 6700K, the Skylake i7 CPU, which is clocked in at 4 GHz at stock, and we could also add that now to our list. It wasn't there previously. I'm not sure why it's included in this test but not the others, but there you go. Obviously our other CPUs that we tested before has as well, and we'll add that in to test the performance against our Xeon. Be a good relative comparison. We'll also add an AMD CPU to mix things up a little. So if we take a look at our multimedia benchmark results, look at the tables, I always switch them to aggregated because it's a more clear indicator of how it relates to all the other CPUs. You can see the tabs along there under the multi-core, multi-thread and single-thread tab drop down, just along the top, and we can see that our Skylake CPU for some reason hasn't been it wasn't added, so I'll just add that into the mix now. I'll hit the tick box, there we go, and we can see now the Skylake CPU is the one that's in the blue key just under our red Xeon. We can see the difference there with that Skylake CPU on the multimedia aggregate. You know, it is kind of like half the performance there, almost, of the Skylake CPU, and it is still it's slightly better than the other Sandy Bridge 2600K, but the two 4700 range CPUs obviously best in it as well in that test. However, surprisingly, in the other test, just the table just below, or the graph just below the multimedia aggregate float, you can see that it's a lot closer in that test to the Skylake CPU than any of the other CPUs in the lineup. So it's basically the second best CPU there on that test. So that's an interesting test in there. It performs very well on the multimedia aggregate float than it does with the aggregate native, or the Integer native, should I say. So we can see there, in relation to that hierarchy list, how it performs. You just bring the other CPUs back into view so you know which color is related to which key on the graph. I will scroll through again at the bottom so you can get the full benchmark result readout. and in the next test we'll take a look at some of the other processor benchmarking on SiSoftware Sandra as well as Cinebench.